What's up guys, Disclosure Artist here, and I've been wanting to make this video for a while. I actually came across this subject a while ago from the late Dr. Pete Peterson, who referenced Jack Houck and his PK parties in the 1980s, and I've always found it fascinating to take a look at the information that is out there available to laymen, not only because of the Freedom of Information Act, but because some things are just so unbelievable, they're just out there for anybody to look at. And this is one of such pieces of information. It's an over an hour long lecture available on YouTube. To this day, anybody can go look at it, and I'm going to present my analysis. I've watched it twice to you guys now, so that we can maybe, as a community, arrive at some sort of conclusion as to which aspects of it are true versus phony baloney. As it turns out, when you first put the lecture on, Jack Houck, the host, he states that it is the 126th of these PK parties. It's the 126th one that he's hosted. And this is in 1985. Of course, I'll have you know that this is the exact time period that the Montauk Project, Stranger Things, all that is going on. He proceeds to explain to the audience that there are multiple levels of class, I guess, for learning this subject matter. He breaks it down to kindergarten, high school, and graduate level. He explains later on that in kindergarten, that's basically where you learn to soften the metal and twist it in a loop with two hands. This is when the metal becomes slightly warm. High school level, basically you're bending things that can't be bent with physical strength. So like, a hacksaw blade or an aluminum rod, being twisted into a pretzel. And graduate level, it says Elton Burke. This basically is where you command it to bend with no touching, like a bucking a bowl, basically. And so 4,600 people, out of that many, 85% were able to do the kindergarten level. 15-20% could do, or 15 to 20 people could do the high school level, and then 8 to 10 people could do the graduate level. He mentions testing conceptual models as an experiment. So in Huntington Beck, California, a little boy's fork actually fell over, soft like putty. It's not about bending the metal, it's about teaching the subconscious that it can do anything. So in these instances, steel will turn black at the time of bending. And he instructs you not to overuse the word can't. And basically, he instructs everybody the 3 steps in order to bend. Basically, the first step is where you connect your mind to the object that you want to affect. Number 2, you talk to it, and you shout together. And the third step is when you let go, and the thought form is released, and the energy basically melts the grain boundaries, is what he calls it. And the whole process is known as warm forming. I actually first heard that term again from Dr. Pete Peterson. Certain PK abilities are different within people, teaks and peaks, telekinetic, psychokinetic. And the people that can actually affect physical change over objects and affect their molecular structure are known as worm formers. So basically, when you create a big stir in a room, like a pandemonium, you find that the mind scans in time. So if you want the feedback to happen now, you put in the work now. So when you are telling something to bend, you specify when you want that to happen. And he makes a joke like you don't want something to bend a week from now, a year from now. You want it to bend now. He also made a joke about teleporting the photos of the audience to the audience, which was met with laughter. So I thought that was interesting that these guys were talking about, something incredible like superhuman abilities, but are making a joke about teleportation, which is just as reality as worm forming is. So I thought that was interesting because that just demonstrated the level of the awareness from the audience. If they think that's funny, then they're aware of some things but not others. So that's just strange to me. He mentioned that there's 35 other people over the world that are hosting PK parties. So, this must have been a hot decade for this sort of activity. I have no idea if these things are still going on, if people are still hosting them. I looked online, I think there's some Facebook groups. If this is a real phenomenon and average people are doing this, it should really be a lot more well known. As if it's not a complete fiasco. So, in Eldenburg, 6 to 20 million people are bending spoons. This guy, John Alexander, he's hosted 80 parties. I think the Eldenburg thing was done over the television, so that was like a mass happening that occurred. And again, I was mentioning making a ruckus and how it distracts someone and basically causes them to release, and suddenly the object will bend. He also describes using a dowsing rod or a pendulum in order to get approval from the objects whether they will bend for you. Because the subconscious says, yeah, it's okay. When it's relayed into twitches in the hand, it's a biosensor, and it basically gives you yes or no answers. So once you've created a mind connection, the point of connection in the head, you focus your thought, and it goes through your arm to the silverware. When you watch this happen, it raises questions as to whether or not this is mass hysteria that's happening, or if this is genuinely occurring. And you see this for about 20 minutes of free bending. They take the camera around the room, they just let the audience, there's about 100 people there, just try their hand at it. And this is at the point when the other guy comes out for the advanced instruction, because Jack Houck was teaching the basic to intermediate level, and this guy who comes out 20 minutes later was teaching the graduation level stuff. So he's repeating the process, but with intent to bend on its own. That's what the difference between the earlier stuff was. He says that the spontaneous drooping of the forehead or the misalignment of the tines has been captured on film. He said that 35 out of 200 people claim they bent. 75% sometimes, only 10%, sometimes 0%. Now this raises the question why there's such a large differential in the percentages of efficacy, and does it have something to do with having a camera on the experiment? Because we know that when something is observed, the Schoenberg effect, it affects the outcome of the experiment. Just to know that eyes are on it. Somehow the universe delivers different results, as opposed to if something is not observing it. The age-old, does a tree make a sound if it falls in the woods? Not if anyone's not around. This is real scientific data that needs to be taken into account when you are looking for these results. It makes me think of, so he mentions the cervix system and how that plays into it. It makes me think of David Adair, the whistleblower from Cosmic Disclosure, who mentioned that the silverware that you're using to bend, it can't be sentimental stuff. It can't be things that you really care about. They have to be essentially scrap items that you're not afraid to lose or, mangle, to distort them in a way, so you can't have any attachment to them emotionally. Because in the instance that he was referring, he talks about an entire neighborhood of silverware morphing by itself, because the people doing the experiment weren't specific about, which knife, when, etc. So that was another example prior to actually watching the Jack Houck lecture that I had heard about these PK parties where strange things were happening. It was a non-local effect. Essentially, they were doing it in one area, and the silverware in a completely different, let's say, adjacent town was affected. Not even at the same time. So, really weird. This guy was mentioning that on a cruise ship in China, the guide held up 2 forks in front of 20 people, and the Tines started waving at them. If I were in the intelligence community and I were trying to do an experiment on an unwitting public, I would hand personally half of them, gallium hardware, and the other regular. Gallium is a metal that softens at the touch of human fingers. I think it's maybe 75 degrees that it actually becomes liquefied. They even make performance art gimmicks out of this material. So it begs the question, if it is working for some people, is it because they're all given the same stuff? I don't know. It's just not enough of a control to really lock down the data, especially since I wasn't there, and I'm really just watching this from what is publicly available to everybody. I think at the end they hand them a questionnaire which asks them to detail how much physical force was actually exerted on the item versus, how much it actually bent by itself. But everything I've read to you now, basically I was able to take in over the course of an hour of watching this lecture. And basically all they're doing is handing a room full of people regular silverware like this and telling them to shout collectively, "Bend! Bend!" several times until something happens. So this sort of thing needs to be looked into. Take care, guys. That's all for now.